Okay. So Dick, I don't know if you want to wait a few more minutes to start. We could do, 841, could you identify who you are? I don't have a name.
Mr. Kinney, you ought to know me by now.
We should.
Okay.
We do.
Well, you have a quorum then, Vic, so if you want to begin, and we could, you could do a roll call as Richard asked to begin.
Okay. All right. It's June 24th, 4:32 or so. This is the Southwest Vermont Supervisory Union Board of Directors meeting. Attending here, besides Dick France, myself, is Jim Culkeen, Superintendent. Not sure who is from CAT TV. If you could identify yourself.
Jim Byers in the studio. We have Josh on Facebook.
I think you got that, Richard.
Yep.
With Tammy Soul, Jackie Kelly, Matthew Bykowski, and Kate Abbott, Renee Gordon. I think that's it. Did I miss anybody?
You forgot me.
Oh, God, how do we do that, Fred?
I don't know. I think it's intentional.
I've been fighting with you for 30 years, and how did I forget? Anyway, all right, I'll let that one go. That doesn't have to be. And Scott McEnany just joined us. So,
I do have some amendments to the agenda when you find that appropriate.
all right, I was going to read the agenda, and then we could add the amendments. Item 1 is public comments. Item 2 is finance and operations. There are 2 sections under that: the treasurer's report for May and the donation from Gen Youth to the food service program. I would like to add an amendment to that category when we get done with this agenda. The consent agenda, including minutes, warrants, retirements, resignations, and nominations. There are no policies. The superintendent's report, which will include memoranda of agreements with the teachers and the support staff. The chair's report, and other items to be brought before the meeting, including is, for your information, is the SVSU budget status report. And we just added Ray Molyneux. If that agenda is appropriate to everyone, we'll go to the amendments. Do I hear any suggestions otherwise?
There are 3 proposed amendments to the agenda. One is discussion and action for a proposal to add a early childhood special education occupational therapist. The second position is an HR finance clerk. And third, a letter C under the superintendent's report, letter C, non-union staff.
Non-union. Okay, and the other 2 positions will be under,
We could do that under, we could do it under finance and operation, do a C under finance and operations related.
okay. I was also going to add an item, but I think we chatted about that already, the security information, so we'll pass on that. Are the amendments appropriate to everyone on the board? Hearing no concerns. Any members of the public? I don't see anybody showing there. Item 2, finance and operations. The treasurer's report for May was included in your packet. Is there a motion to approve that to accept the treasurer's report?
I'll move it.
We have a motion from Fran. We need a second.
Second.
Second from Tammy. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the treasurer's report for May signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Are there any abstentions? Seeing none, motion carries. The report is accepted. There is a donation from Gen Youth to the Food Service Program. We would look for a motion to
So moved.
accept that donation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the Gen Youth? No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Jim, you wanted to discuss item C, which is non-union staff,
No, that's gonna be C under the superintendent's
under the
report.
superintendent's report. Excuse
So
me.
C under this is going to be proposal for early childhood special education occupational therapist. And I asked Dr. Kate Abbott, our Director of Early Childhood Education, to join us to explain what this is. So Kate is here.
Fire away, Kate.
Hi. So this proposal is to replace a retired contracted service personnel that we had on contract in Neely, who's been with the early education department for 25 years. When Ann, who's finding a pediatric occupational therapist is pretty rare. But when Ann was in the process of retiring, we put this into the budget as an Idea B expense, but I never came forward with the request to hire for this proposal. So we are requesting a 0.8 occupational therapist to replace our retiring contracted service provider. And basically it just allows us to help our children in early childhood special education develop the fine motor, sensory motor, and adaptive skills they need per their IEPs so that we can remain in compliance with the regulations and make sure that our children have a good, healthy start with working on fine motor skills. So it's a 0.8 position and it would be grant funded, so it won't have an impact on the local budget.
No impact on the local budget, you said?
Correct. But it would be a hired 0.8 position versus a contracted 0.8 position.
How does that
Hiring
work?
hiring is
Right.
actually more cost effective generally because contracted rates include there's an administrative fee typically if you go through an agency. So by hiring it allows for longevity and it also usually is a cost savings.
I have a question,
Grant?
Jackie.
Oh,
I-
yeah, sorry.
So when the grant is over, does the person's job cease?
So Idea B grant is a federal grant that is a pass through the state. So since 1975, with the beginning of special education as a federally mandated service. So this is the federal government's component of what is required to be offered to offset the district's costs. So as long as there's been special education, there's been, to my knowledge, unless Renee, you have a better special education finance history than I do, but the Idea B grant is one that is in the legislation to help offset states' costs for special education. So it's never gone away.
And in fact, they're supplemental costs, not direct costs that we would normally be paying through the district anyway, right? They don't supplant district costs. Isn't that correct?
The Idea B grant?
Yeah.
I'm
It's
looking for the
always-
correct,
It's always supplemental, not supplanting anything that we would ordinarily do anyway. It helps us do further.
so I need Renee's help on finding the correct word for this type of grant. It is a grant that it requires that we have a percentage of district effort. It can't replace the district's effort.
That's what I mean.
Yes, yeah, that's it. But there's a word for it and I'm losing it right now, I'm sorry.
We're required to have maintenance of effort, so that's what our IDA allows us to do.
Right. And I've heard it expressed as we can't supplant our normal effort with these funds. We can't replace them with these funds. They have to be used to provide additional services that we would not be providing otherwise. I think it comes to the same thing, but probably there are differences when you get into the weeds.
Are there other questions for Kate? Before I go on, Richard, Frank Barnes, and Bill Basic were added in here for your record. So you would need a motion to add that position.
Correct. The early childhood special education occupational therapist.
I'll move that.
Okay, motion from Ray. Is that a second from Scott? We have a second from Scott. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion carries. Position is added. And there's a finance clerk.
This is related to the other supervisory union that is here with us, coming under us at some point, but they are losing a staff member who is leaving at the end of this month. So we're going to begin to take over some of the financial responsibilities for Battenkill Valley. So this will be a clerk position between HR and finance, because our operation is a little bit different. Some of the job responsibilities that when we received from Superintendent Basic, what those job responsibilities look like, it really, for our organization, it crosses over to HR and finance. So it's going to be a direct bill to Battenkill Valley for this school year to pay for this position, and stipends that may go to other employees in HR and in finance that'll take on the duties. So I do have a job description. It'll report to the Director of Finance and Operations and the Director of Human Resources. So the position will be shared between those two departments. And it seemed, from our point of view, to make sense to do this now rather than have them hire somebody, if they even could, for what would be a one-year position. So the total, we're doing a memorandum of understanding with Battenkill Valley for all the services that we'll be providing for them going forward after July 1. And there were employees of the SU up at Battenkill Valley today that have been there actually on quite a few occasions. I understand that I believe it was the person's last day today, so it was important that there were some discussions held. So the total billing of the memorandum of understanding may, exceed more than $70,000 in direct billing in the course of the year, depending on how much this work does. But it's not the intent of the SVSU to make any money on the position. It's whatever our direct costs are, we will bill to Battenkill Valley. So the request is to create a position of HR and finance clerk. Just to let you know, the salary range, the pay range for this position is $35,000 to $38,000.
Do we have a motion to that effect?
I'll move it.
Motion from Fran,
I'll second it.
second from Ray. Any
May
further?
may I ask one question?
Yes.
Just to be clear, this person is, where are they actually working?
They will be at
Our offices or their offices?
our central office. We'll be taking
Okay,
their payroll operations and other operations at our office.
Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? And the motion carries to add a finance clerk.
Thank you.
I neglected to add an item that Frank Barnes needs addressed under finance and operations. Essentially, it's a request, it's an RFP to upgrade the security infrastructure because of the work that's being done online. With your approval, I'd like to add that into the agenda. If no objection, Frank, would you like to address that issue?
Sure. We had, hang on. We had switched our internet service provider this year, beginning July 1st. And when we did that, we increased the capacity to 10 gig of fiber broadband service. And with these current conditions that we're under, with so many people connecting and many more people using the internet remotely, we need to ramp up the security, the cybersecurity component, and the filtering systems. So this is what that's for. The money that to purchase it is out of this year's budget. I believe the budget line is on that document that I sent to you, Dick. But if anybody has any questions, that's essentially it.
Yeah, there were 3 bids returned here, and the Gov Connection to Merrimack, New Hampshire was the low bid at $29,421.32. So we would ask for a motion to award a contract to Connection of Merrimack, New Hampshire to provide equipment, software, and licenses necessary to update the current Palo Alto security infrastructure at a cost of $29,421.32.
So moved.
I have a motion from Fran. Is there a second? Second from Tammy. Further discussion?
I have a question, Frank, and it's kind of like a codicil for this. How familiar are you with the CUD, C-U-D, that's just newly developing, and in a couple of years, will we dovetail into that service?
I'm not sure, because the last thing that I read about that, it seemed like there was a separation between education and make sure I'm getting this right. That's the regional group.
Yes, it's the regional group. Too bad Tim isn't here because he's the chairperson.
Right. I've been meaning to reach out to Tim, but I don't think that would have any effect on this particular well, I know it wouldn't have an effect on this particular purchase. However, that may have an effect on, right now we're trying to make sure that we close the gap on all of the families that currently still don't have internet service. And I actually want to reach out to Tim and talk to him about that, because that may affect that and what we're able to do with that. But it has nothing to do with this particular purchase.
Right, but it could have something in the future as the CUD develops. And so I think a conversation with him would be excellent.
Yeah, that's on my radar. Thank you, Jackie.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of a motion to award the contract to Connection of Merrimack for $29,421.32, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? No
Aye.
abstentions?
Can I just bring something up that I think we need to be aware of, so that we don't have everybody say that you do have a quorum at this meeting, but Tammy and Jackie should not be making seconds or motions, because they're not listed as members of this committee, if I understand, unless, right? So the 4 members who are present, which gives you a quorum tonight, is Fran, Ray, Scott, and Dick. It doesn't show that Tammy or Jackie are, so they're technically members of the public at the meeting. So I don't know, Richard, do you have anybody, either Tammy or Jackie recorded as making a motion or a second?
Wow. To my knowledge, it was Tammy did once and I said it at the same time. So in that one instance, I don't know whether we can just say I'm happy to
I would,
take that one over.
I'm okay. I've got Ray and Scott and Fran and Ray and I think we're okay.
okay, good, because I wouldn't have to come back and redo a vote because we didn't have a proper second for it. Thank you for understanding.
So we have a unanimous vote, I think is where we were.
4 people.
To accept that that proposal. That being done, the consent agenda, minutes, warrants, retirees, resignations, and nominations. Do we have?
I'll move the agenda.
Fran has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Scott. Discussion. I have only one item. Richard, it probably hasn't quite come through yet, but I keep being listed as chair of the SVU ESD, and that's Chris's territory, Chris Murphy.
Okay, I'll fix that. I thought I had fixed that, but we're okay.
Thank you. If no further discussion, all those in favor of accepting the consent agenda, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? No abstentions? And the motion carries. There are no policies, which moves us on to the superintendent's report. Jim?
Some of you have seen these agreements from your other board meetings, but this is, SU does have employees that are members of the teachers union, and the sports staff will take it first. So it's a memorandum of agreement between the Teachers Association and the school boards that there will be no increase in wages. This year, the contract will be extended 1 year. There is no step increase for teachers either. To be clear, there is column movement. Like if someone completed their master's degree, they would go over to the next column that would result in a pay increase for those individuals, but that is the smaller group of employees, and that is actually a contractual benefit, not a pay increase, even though it does result in pay, but just wanted to be clear. This agreement does have a reopener if the funds, we do receive all the funds that we anticipate we may get from the Ed Fund. And there are plenty of people out there that are saying that we will, but then they follow up with, though we don't know where we're going to get the funds from. Then we do have an obligation to reopen negotiations. But again, I want to thank the teachers for agreeing to this. It is a big give on their part because, as you know, our negotiations were stalled and we were going to fact finding. So I can't thank them enough. It gives us a breather in planning to see. And we did not have to RIF any teachers. That was part of the agreement. We would not RIF anyone if they agreed to this. So I ask that you vote and accept that and join me in thanking the teachers.
Go ahead, Scott.
Yes, please extend a thank you to the teachers from I'm sure this entire board, and I make a motion to accept.
I second that motion.
All right, motion from Scott, second from Ray. Any further discussion?
No.
Excuse me?
I just add my appreciation for the collaboration between the SU and the teachers union. It's great that it worked out that way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose, I don't know in any instance or in the other board, and to be clear too, to Superintendent Colkeen too, and all your hard work. I know we got a lot of late night emails, meaning a lot of stuff was happening around the clock, and I know how hard you worked on it too. So thank you to you and to the teachers and all of the staff that made this decision.
Thank you. And Ray, you're absolutely right. The collaboration was actually kind of uplifting and heartwarming that they were so willing, and that I
Right.
with that.
Well, there are advantages to both sides. And it's also probably the right thing to do for our children who are in school.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the memorandum of agreement, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I don't hear any in opposition or any abstention. The motion carries with thanks from this board for the Teachers Association. And go ahead, Jim.
Support staff, it's the same memorandum of agreement, and again, their leadership were wonderful to work with on this. You know, they were supportive. They worked well with us. Number of meetings, we assured them the same thing. Their agreement has that same reopener clause if need to be. That doesn't guarantee anybody a raise, even if all the money's there. It just means that you will reopen. You have pledged to sit down and negotiate with them no later than this fall for the following year. But there is a reopener for this year. We have every dollar that we have that we thought we were going to get, but we also have expenses that we didn't anticipate we were going to have too. But their leadership was, and we don't always see eye to eye, and I don't mean just the support staff. I mean, you know, just our roles are different, but cooperation was outstanding. So I thank them also.
I'll make a motion to accept that and extend my thanks to their leadership and to their membership for agreeing to collaborate with us on this to make next year as good as we can make it, given the potentially constricting financial situation from the state and federal government.
We have a motion from Ray, a second. Do we hear a
I'll
second?
second it.
Okay, thank you, Fran. A motion and a second from Fran. If there's is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I heard none in opposition, and I see no abstentions. So the motion to accept the memorandum with the board's thanks is accepted.
The letter C is a non-union memorandum. Well, it's not a memorandum. It's you need to take a vote on non-union personnel. And I told both unions right up front that non-union personnel is central office, and you also have non-union personnel in it's the directors I just panicked for a minute thinking, wait a minute, I don't have a memory of understanding here with the principals. You don't sign that contract, but I do want to thank them because they also agreed. They also agreed to take a zero, and that's the principals, vice principals, associate principals. But you don't sign their contract because you don't employ any principals. But that was the third group that I was negotiating with. So what I'm asking you, normally what you do after we've settled all of the union contracts, the boards take a vote on what you're going to give your non-union personnel. And my recommendation is that they receive exactly what your unionized personnel did, and that would be that we do not give a cost of living adjustment to non-union personnel this year. Same thing, my pledge to them would be that if we find ourselves in the position that we reopen with the union personnel and they do receive some type of an increase during this fiscal year, then this board should consider doing that for non-union personnel too. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think that is the question that will be asked, because they're not represented by a union. They're represented by me to you. And so you should also know that this includes me too, because I pledged to not take a pay increase right from the beginning. That's what I told the unions when I met with them, and that I would recommend that to all the boards to do with non-union personnel. So I guess I need a motion from you that you will not be granting a pay increase to the non-union personnel.
I'll move it.
I have a motion from Fran. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Scott. Is there further discussion?
So they're following the teachers and the support staff. And if we reopen negotiations with them, we'll negotiate with the non-union staff.
No, you don't negotiate with them. What we
Right.
would be in, Ray, is then it would be a board vote whether you wanted to grant a similar raise to the non-union personnel.
But that after the both the union contracts we've come to an agreement with them about an increase because there is money available from the state.
Right. Only then would that trigger that I would come back to the board with any type of recommendation.
But there is an asymmetry here because the non-union personnel would have been receiving an increase were there sufficient funds that's built into the budget, right?
Well, correct, but they never automatically get an increase. It's always a vote of the boards to
You make that decision, yes. Okay. I'll grant you that, so. That seems, you've added a different contingency because now it's contingent on the union contracts being, that something is agreed to with the unions about the increases based on money availability for funding the complete project.
following the practice that you always follow, which is we do not vote on what increase. The boards do not typically vote
So
on
after,
until
okay.
after.
Yeah, all right. Okay, thank you.
Are we all set with that?
Yes.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? And the motion carries. So non-contract personnel, we'll be discussing that when we get around to figuring out if there's enough money for union contracts. Anything else, Jim?
Just want, the big question is, what does fall look like? What school opening looks like? I just want to let you know, and you may have already heard me say this at, either the MAU board or the elementary board. We have 3 teams looking at what opening of school is going to look like, and all following state, federal guidelines and developing a number of different contingencies. There's an elementary school team. And that is being led by Laura Boudreau, a middle school and high school team being led by Melissa Senecal, and a athletic and sporting event being led by the MAU athletic director, Ashley Hoyt. And they all report back to the superintendent to help me make decisions on what the opening of school would look like. And, we've barely wrapped up the year of remote learning as we go into this planning. And I will tell you that people are exhausted, and I'm going to try and make some people take a rest starting next week so that we can come back and really, the work that's already being done is tremendous on what this looks like. But until we have firm guidance from the AOE, and we're getting a lot of guidance from the Secretary of Education, but we also know that can fluctuate weekly as the public health guidance changes. So one of our biggest challenges too is, it's all a challenge, but particularly what fall sports is going to look like. It had to be devastating for our athletes that they lost their spring season, and fall is unknown, particularly contact sports. The example I like to use is, you're telling me I can only put a student on every other seat in a bus, or 1 per seat, or whatever that guidance is, and we're going to allow football to be played with huddles and tackling, and or wrestling in the winter time. So and there still isn't a vaccine. I don't want to panic everyone who's playing those sports, but they should know that that's being discussed and trying. Our nurses have been tremendous. They're on all of these teams to help interpret the medical information and give guidance to these teams as we plan. I think it's becoming very clear that we won't be, unless there is a spike in the virus again, I don't think we're going to be entering remote learning. We will be physically in the building. What protections are going to be required if they're available, and what the day looks like. And I see huge potential impact in middle school and high school days because the guidance is that we keep students together as much as possible. But think of how a high school or middle school works. The students, the students you're in your English class with are maybe not the ones that are in your social studies class or not the ones in your math class because the students are moving. That's not what the guidance wants us to do. They want us to cluster our students and keep them together as much as possible. So but again, that guidance could change by fall. So it is a challenge, but you should know that you have 3 great teams working on what the opening of school would look like. The other thing that we are beginning to look at is maybe adapting the schedule the calendar that some of the schools that the Southwest Vermont area superintendents are looking at a possible push back till after Labor Day for the start of school. But if we did that, it would probably only be for our students, not for teachers. That would bring our teachers in at the regular scheduled start of August 24th. And maybe have, I might be coming back to the board saying that we'll go back to less student days again, do 175 rather than the 180 that we have included for our students. But I did inform the union that of that because I would have to have discussions with the union and bring a memorandum of understanding together because their belief is that there's a limit of the number of days for professional learning, that those days are limited in the contract. So if I do less student days, which results in more teacher days, then they would view that as a possible contract violation, and we would have to discuss what that looks like. So I want to put that on your radar that by August, we may, maybe even earlier than that, I might be telling you so that we tell parents as much as possible that the start of school for students may be delayed till after Labor Day. And that would give us the opportunity to test out some of our protocols and systems that we put in, or it could even be that it's we don't bring all students back, we do a staggered start. Those are all things that are being looked at. So, and that's just a thank you. You probably got your last board packet that you're going to receive from Karen Kulakowski, my administrative assistant, who is retiring at the end of this month. So I just wanted to wish her well and thank her for her assistance over the past 2 years while she's been with me. We have advertised for that position. The application date has closed, and we will be scheduling interviews for that position the week of July 6th. Any questions that you have for me? I do want to thank the boards. I thank the teachers. I want to thank you. I think that you've adapted well to remote meetings, and it's different. For some of you, it might have been the first time you've used a computer this much. So thank you for your cooperation and your adaptability. And who knows how long we'll continue this before we're allowed to start having public gatherings again. So thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I guess I always think that the board involvement in what happens in the school system is minimal. And it's worth noting the professionals in the system, including those folks in central office, as well as teacher support and non-union folks that make this happen. I think the boards are we're there, but the heavy lifting is all done by you folks. So thank you. I have a few other things. First of all, my thanks to Karen. She knows how to track me down, and I always think somebody like that has to work pretty hard at it, and she does, so she will be missed. I had a question about, and this may not be an appropriate timing for it, but the equity coordinator, at one time, there were no applications for that position. Just as a curiosity, where is that now?
So because of one of the parts of the negotiation with the union is that we weren't filling any open positions unless absolutely necessary. So we are at this point pursuing an alternate funding source for that position. So it has not been posted yet until we're sure of the funding, if we can get a possible other funding source for it. I know that sounds kind of vague, but I am still very much committed to it. As you know, I advocated that it be added, over a 2-year budget process. And so it probably is going to be end of August, beginning of September before we know whether we have the funds for it. We do have the line item in the budget, so either we have another funding source for it, or I'll be saying we will fill it through the budget process if we feel our funding levels are stable. So,
Thank you. The superintendent's evaluation, several of us have been working on that. It got short-circuited to some degree because we were trying to include staff feedback and some other, a look at several of the programs within the system. We hadn't been able to do that because of how things have developed with COVID-19, but we will be putting that together shortly, and you'll be able to see that, Jim. I have to get back to Vermont Digger, who's very interested in, among other things, why we spend so much money on school resource officers. I'm not sure all the things that are driving this interest, but I will get back to that organization, see if I can answer some questions reasonably. I know Jim has already provided information to him through a Freedom of Information Act. And so thank you for that, Jim, and I'll get back to you on what happens there. And maybe one of the things that's driving this is an open letter I got. I don't know how many board members did get this letter, but essentially it's an open letter calling for the removal of school resource officers and elimination of any disciplinary measures and exclusion. We have policies and procedures in place to cover these things. They have stated in this letter, which I'll forward to Jim and anyone else who's interested, they state essentially that a police presence in our schools since school shootings has threatened student safety and denies students the opportunity to learn. I don't think you'd be surprised to find that I disagree with this pretty strongly, and I don't see that we need to change our policies on exclusion or discipline. But I will forward that letter, I guess, to everyone so that you can get a good look at it. I disagree with the position strongly, and I guess that's where I will leave my comments on it.
Dick, if you could send that to me too. I didn't get it. Would love to see it based on what I've seen right here. I think from my perspective, yeah, I wish that there wasn't a need for a school resource officer too. But the fact of the matter is there's a need for a school resource officer.
Yeah.
From my point of view.
They'd like to install restorative justice measures, and they'd like to see somebody in place that takes care of emotional mental preparedness issues.
Maybe they would be enlightened to learn that most of that stuff is there as well, but we're still protecting our kids from the people who are walking in off the street with firearms and causing a lot of damage.
That certainly was the motivation for the elementary board's vote.
Yeah.
Which, you know, that would, because Dick referenced the freedom of information request I got from Vermont Digger for how much we spent. We spend more money on the elementary districts for SROs than we do at the middle school and high school. And that was driven by a safety concern by the elementary board. I don't mean to speak for the board, but that's how I recall it.
Yes, and besides that, and maybe even more important now with some of the social upheaval that's going on, is a pretty decent relationship being developed between officers of the law in all kinds of places. And I think it doesn't hurt kids to see that. So I'll forward the letter to everyone just so you know what's going on. That's my position on it.
You're going to send it to me too, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the other, I don't know, Cat TV's on, so this will be public record. But the one thing that I think should be spelled out explicitly or should be very aware is the sheriff who is in the town of Shaftesbury's school. I know my two kids have come to really appreciate their relationship with him and the type of person he is and the way he conducts himself with those kids. And if you think of police, the root of policing being a community presence and a positive community presence, that's exactly what you have there. So to your point, Dick, it's more than just a strong arm presence to try and intimidate people, and it's in fact quite the opposite. Now, I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I see no reason to change any of our policies on discipline, expulsion, or school resource officers. So I realize this is not an item for action. I just wanted to inform you, and I'll get the letter out so everybody gets a chance to see that. Are there, excuse me?
You know, the beauty of Zoom meetings is superintendents can get text messages during the meeting and remind us of what he forgot to bring up. So I had Mr. Barnes, Director of Technology Education, on it. You could permit him. There is an K1 alert going on. You know that the tech department did a wonderful job with the distribution of Chromebooks so our students can remotely learn. But they need those Chromebooks back, and they've been doing a tremendous effort to do it, but they're not all back. So there is a K-12 alert going out, but Frank is here, so maybe there's people home listening on Cat TV, or we'll watch this later and hear how that's working and what we need to track down. Frank?
Yeah, thank you. Oops, I was there and then I left. Thanks a lot, Jim. Yeah, we had scheduled for all of the remaining Chromebooks that haven't come back yet to be returned this week at the high school. And the reason that they need to be returned at the high school is because that's where we have our processing and we do decontamination on those Chromebooks. They cook in a UV chamber for a while before we deal with them. So if everybody pre-K through grade 11, we have all the senior Chromebooks back, but pre-K through 11, if they could return those Chromebooks between the hours of 9 and 2, Thursday and Friday. We've been collecting them all week. It was posted last week that this is when we'd be doing it. At any rate, that would be a great help. I'll be sending out an alert message and social media messages later tonight too. But if anybody happens to be watching this, please get your Chromebooks back to us. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Frank. Great effort by your defense.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
Any other items to be brought before the board? Hearing none, including for your information is the budget status report, and we would need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Fran, second by Scott. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you, folks.
Yeah.
Goodbye.